the heart of this nation, under skies so blue,
there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true.
from the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe.
So, picture this. It's April 2026, and a man with an active international arrest warrant for murder just walks right out of a Massachusetts jail.
Yeah, and he walks out after paying a $500 bail.
Right, $500. And this isn't because the police, made some clerical mistake or lost his paperwork.
No, not at all.
And it definitely wasn't because his name was suddenly cleared. I mean, he walked out because 4 entirely different layers of the American justice system collided in the exact same room, and they completely broke down.
It's honestly staggering when you look at it.
It really is. So, welcome to another deep dive. Today, our mission is to explore a highly specific, very intense news report from April 30, 2026.
Yeah, centering on this single high-profile immigration case.
Exactly. We're going to look at how a massive, complex web of different jurisdictions actually functions, or, well, malfunctions in reality.
Because it really forces us as a society to look at what happens when overlapping systems of authority have totally different, sometimes entirely contradictory mandates.
Right. Now, before we get into the timeline, we need to establish exactly what we're looking at for you, the listener. Our primary text today is an article by Scott McClowan, and it was published in Town Hall.
Which is an important context clue.
It is. The text itself describes Town Hall's offering conservative reporting that takes on the radical left and woke media. So, because we are dissecting an inherently political text, I want to be upfront with you right now.
Yeah, we have to lay the ground rules.
We are not taking sides here. We are not validating the political framing of this article, and we are not endorsing the viewpoints presented in the text.
Right, that's not what we do here.
Our goal in this deep dive is strictly to unpack the timeline of events. We want to understand the mechanics of the legal systems involved and analyze the arguments exactly as they are presented in the original source material.
Basically looking at the architecture of the story.
Right. We are looking at the architecture, not campaigning for its conclusion.
Which is really the only way to approach a politically charged text if you want to understand it. I mean, you have to separate the actual mechanics of what happened on the ground from the rhetoric of how it's being described.
Exactly. So let's look at the core narrative. We are tracing the trajectory of a single individual, Bryan Rafael Gomez.
And his story covers a lot of ground.
It really does. It involves a 2022 border crossing, an international murder warrant, local assault charges, and a highly controversial federal judicial release order.
It's a lot to untangle.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because we need to build this chronological timeline logically. So how does this guy enter the system in the first place?
Right. So according to the Department of Homeland Security, which is cited in the article, the timeline begins in 2022.
Okay.
Gomez entered the U.S. illegally and was encountered by U.S. Border Patrol near Lukeville, Arizona.
Now, the text explicitly states that after this encounter, he was, quote, released by the Biden administration.
Yeah, it uses that specific phrasing.
And for someone listening to that, it sounds like someone just opened a gate and waved him through. But mechanically, what is actually happening there? Like, why would Border Patrol encounter someone crossing illegally and then just release them?
Well, it comes down to the sheer logistics and, the legal constraints of border enforcement. When the source says released, it usually means the individual was processed and given a notice to appear in immigration court at a later date.
So they aren't just ignoring him. They're putting him in the system.
Right. Because federal detention facilities have finite bed space. When those facilities are over capacity, which, by the way, has been a chronic issue across multiple administrations, officers have to use alternative mechanisms.
Like what?
They might use humanitarian parole or alternatives to detention, like ankle monitors, simply because they cannot physically or legally hold every single person pending a hearing.
Especially when those hearings might be years away, right? Because of the massive court backlogs.
Exactly. The system is jammed up.
So the system is essentially saying, we know you are here, we are putting you in the administrative queue, but we just don't have the space to lock you up right now.
Precisely. And the source doesn't give us the exact legal mechanism of his release, but it clearly attributes the policy environment that allowed for it to the administration at the time.
Okay, so he is in the United States, in the system, but out of custody.
Right.
And that brings us to 2023. where the scope of this gets much, much bigger. I mean, the local system has this massive blind spot to the rest of the world, and that blind spot gets exposed.
It really does, because on January 24th, 2023, the coordination of the Courts of Instruction of the National District of Santo Domingo in the Dominican Republic issues a criminal arrest warrant for Gomez.
And the charge is murder.
Yes, for homicide.
And the article points out, specifically citing a tweet from a reporter named Bill Malugan that is embedded in the text, that this escalated into an Interpol red notice.
Yeah, the red notice is a big deal in the narrative.
But I want to clarify something for the listener. We hear Interpol red notice, and we instantly think of some like automatic global arrest warrant, like Jason Bourne stuff. But functionally, it's really just a digital sticky note on a file, isn't it? It doesn't actually force local police to do anything.
That is such a critical distinction to make. Interpol is not an international police force.
Right.
They don't have agents kicking down doors in Massachusetts. A red notice is simply a global flag. It's a request from one country to law enforcement worldwide to locate and provisionally arrest a person pending extradition.
Pending extradition. So it's just a heads up.
Yeah. It relies entirely on the local laws of the jurisdiction where that person is actually found. It doesn't grant local police any magical new authority.
So it's basically the Dominican Republic raising their hand and saying, hey, if any of you happen to bump into this guy, we really want him for a homicide.
Exactly. But here's the rub. Local police officers don't enforce foreign arrest warrants.
Right. They enforce local state law.
Exactly.
Which perfectly sets up the chaos of April 4th, 2026. Because Gomez is in Worcester, Massachusetts, and he is arrested by the Worcester Police Department.
Right.
But he is not arrested for the murder of the DR. He's arrested for local assault and battery charges.
Yeah, and this is where we need a better framework to understand what's happening, because it's not just a single justice machine that's broken.
What do you mean?
It's like having 3 different referees on the exact same field, but one is officiating a soccer game, one is calling a rugby match, and one is enforcing tennis rules.
Oh, wow, yeah.
They are all rigorously following their own rules,
Yeah.
but the rules inherently contradict each other.
I love that analogy, because in this soccer game, the local referee looks at the play, and the text says Gomez is granted a $500 bail.
Right?
And I have to stop and push back on this, because if you're listening to this and wondering how a local judge can just ignore an international murder warrant, it sounds insane. I mean, isn't public safety part of a local judge's mandate?
You would think so, yeah.
How can a judge look at a violent assault charge, see a giant red flag for murder right next to it, and say, yeah, $500 seems fine?
I know, it sounds totally contradictory until you dive into the exact parameters of state jurisdiction and bail reform.
Okay, walk me through that.
When a local magistrate in Massachusetts sets bail, they are strictly governed by state laws tied to the charge in front of them, which is the assault and battery.
Just that specific charge.
Yes. In many jurisdictions, the primary and sometimes only purpose of bail is to ensure the defendant returns for their court date. It's not designed to act as a preventative detention tool.
So they are legally wearing blinders. They're only allowed to look at the local assault.
Exactly. Furthermore, local courts don't always have seamless integration with international databases anyway.
So they might not have even seen the red notice.
It's possible, but even if the judge saw the red notice, state law might severely limit their legal authority to hold someone without bail solely based on a foreign nation's request.
Especially if the U.S. federal government hasn't yet executed a formal signed extradition warrant.
Right. The local judge just doesn't have the legal mechanism to hold him for the Dominican Republic.
So the local judge is playing by local rules. But the federal government was watching the field, too. Because the text explicitly notes that the Department of Homeland Security issued a detainer.
Yes, they did.
Let's explain the how here. What exactly is a detainer, and how does it legally function?
A detainer is essentially a request. It's a piece of paper from ICE sent to a local jail saying, hey, we believe this person is deportable. Please hold them for up to 48 hours beyond when you would normally release them so we can come pick them up.
But it's just a request, right? Because of the 10th Amendment, the federal government can't commandeer local police to do federal immigration work.
That's right. Under the anti-commandeering doctrine of the Constitution, state and local authorities are not legally obligated to honor ICE detainers.
And we hear a lot about that in the news.
Yeah, many jurisdictions, which are often labeled sanctuary cities, have local laws explicitly forbidding their jails from honoring these requests unless accompanied by a federal judge's criminal warrant.
But in this specific case in Worcester, the article says the detainer actually was honored.
Yes, it was. And the timeline here is super tight.
Right.
Gomez paid the $500 local bail for the assault. But because the local jail chose to honor the IC detainer, he wasn't released onto the street.
Okay, so the local system held him just long enough.
Yeah, ICE was notified, and they arrived and arrested Gomez immediately.
Which makes sense. He's a fugitive. And the source actually mentions Gomez was one of 5 fugitive illegal aliens arrested in New England by ICE Boston that April.
So ICE is very active here.
Yeah, so the federal executive branch does its job. They take him into custody. They see the international warrant. They see the local assault charge. They have him in detention. It feels like the system finally caught up to him.
It really does. And Malugan's tweet in the article even notes he had a standing deportation order. It seems like the end of the line.
But here's where it gets really interesting. Because ICE doesn't have the final say.
No, the courts do.
The courts do.
Yeah.
On April 28, 2026, a federal judge intervenes. The text says U.S. District Court Judge Melissa R. DuBose, and it makes a huge point to emphasize she is a Rhode Island federal judge appointed in the final days of the Biden administration. She orders Gomez released from IC custody.
And this is the pivot point of the entire article. It is where the legal architecture gets incredibly complex.
I am stuck on this. I mean, you have a man with a standing deportation order, an Interpol red notice for murder, and a recent local assault arrest.
Yeah.
How does a single judge legally justify overriding a federal enforcement agency and ordering his release?
Well, while the article doesn't give us the judge's written rationale, we have to look at how a release like this actually functions mechanically. It usually involves a writ of habeas corpus, which is a fundamental constitutional right protecting against unlawful and indefinite imprisonment.
Okay, but how is his imprisonment unlawful if he literally has a deportation order?
Because immigration detention is administrative, it's not punitive.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. ICE can hold you to deport you, but they can't hold you forever as a punishment. Supreme Court precedent generally limits how long ICE can detain someone if their deportation isn't, quote, reasonably foreseeable.
Wait, so if they can't actually deport him quickly, they have to let him go?
Pretty much. If, for example, the Dominican Republic hasn't finalized the formal extradition paperwork, or if there is some procedural flaw in how IC held him, a federal judge looking strictly at the text of the law might rule that his continued administrative detention violates constitutional due process.
So the judge is playing the role of the tennis referee in your analogy. IC is trying to play rugby, but the judge says, I don't care about the murder warrant right now. I care about whether your specific administrative hold violates due process.
Exactly. And a federal judge appointed for life is insulated from political pressure. They aren't looking at the optics of releasing him. They are looking at the strict constitutional limits of executive detention power.
Which optically creates an absolute shockwave. I mean, when a judicial decision so starkly contrasts with the stated goals of a federal law enforcement agency, it moves immediately from a legal procedural story to a massive political flashpoint.
Oh, instantly.
And what's fascinating here is how quickly the language shifts from legal facts to high-stakes political warfare. The article gives us a direct quote from the DHS Acting Assistant Secretary at the time, Lauren Biss.
And that quote perfectly encapsulates the collision of law, politics, and federalism.
Let me read her exact words. She says, Bryan Rafael Gomez is a criminal illegal alien from the Dominican Republic with an international warrant for homicide. An activist judge appointed by Joe Biden released this wanted murderer back into American communities.
So notice the specific use of the word activist there.
Yeah, that stands out.
That is not a legal counterargument. She is moving the goalposts entirely into a political arena. By calling the judge an activist, the DHS official is delegitimizing the legal ruling itself.
Right.
She isn't arguing about due process or habeas corpus statutes. She is framing the judge's decision as an inherently political act designed to cause harm.
Right. She ties it directly to the previous administration. She says, appointed by Joe Biden. She's drawing a straight line from a political party to the perceived danger in the community.
Exactly.
But she goes even further. The quote continues. She says, this is yet another example of an activist judge trying to thwart President Trump's mandate from the American people to remove criminal illegal aliens from our communities.
That is the most revealing part of the entire statement. Listen to that word, mandate.
Yeah, that jumped right off the page for me.
Because under this framework, which the text explicitly notes is operating under President Trump and Secretary Mullen immigration enforcement, is not being described merely as executing the law.
Right.
It is being described as the execution of an electoral mandate.
So the DHS official is basically arguing that the executive branch has a direct order from the voters and that an unelected, lifetime-appointed judge is actively trying to override the will of the American people.
Precisely. It elevates a disagreement over an ICE detention into a fundamental constitutional conflict.
Between the branches of government.
Yeah, between Article 2 of the Constitution, the executive branch, and Article 3, the judicial branch. The executive claims a democratic mandate, while the judiciary claims constitutional independence.
It's framing the courtroom not as a place of neutral arbitration, but as an active political battlefield. And honestly, when you step back and look at the ecosystem of this source material, that battlefield framing makes total sense.
Yeah, the context of the publication matters a lot.
Right. If you look at the actual page this article is printed on, it is full of surrounding context. It's not just a sterile newswire.
What else is on the page?
Well, there are banners and sidebar headlines everywhere. The top of the page literally says, quote, Schumer shutdown sale. Help us tell the truth about the Schumer shutdown. 60% off memberships.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, and there are other headlines listed too, like Democrats have a massive Graham-Plattner problem, and DeSantis just made sure Hakeem Jeffries will never try that stunt again. There is even a promo code to get a VIP membership using the word FIGHT.
So the environment the story lives in is intensely partisan.
Very.
Which naturally informs how the reader is supposed to digest these facts.
Exactly. The source material strategically juxtaposes this highly specific, very complicated legal process against a much broader national political war. It's telling the reader, this isn't just an isolated legal anomaly in New England.
Right, it's a symptom.
Yes, it's a symptom of a nationwide struggle between competing political ideologies. The medium itself is amplifying the message that Lauren Biss is delivering in her quote.
That's a vital observation. It shows how a single case, one man's journey through a border crossing in Arizona, a warrant in the Dominican Republic, a police station in Worcester, and a Rhode Island federal court is completely absorbed into a macro-level narrative.
A narrative about safety and sovereignty.
Exactly. The text uses Gomez not just as a news subject, but as undeniable proof of the publication's broader worldview.
So what does this all mean? We started by talking about 4 different layers of the justice system colliding in the same room. We trace this guy from a 2022 border crossing where the system is too overwhelmed to hold him, to an international database flag that has no local enforcement teeth.
Yeah.
Then he lands in a local court in Worcester where bail laws are restricted only to the charge in front of them, totally blind to the murder warrant. ICE steps in using a detainer, they finally get him, but then a lifetime-appointed federal judge exercises constitutional due process and says, release him.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this single case acts as a lightning rod for the most difficult structural debates we have as a society.
It really does.
It is so easy to look at this timeline and say the system is broken, but the harsh reality is that this friction between local, federal, and international law isn't a glitch in the system. It is a deliberate feature of American federalism.
Wait, what do you mean by that? A deliberate feature?
Well, the founders designed a system with distributed power to prevent any single entity from having absolute authority. State courts operate independently of federal agencies. Federal judges operate independently of the executive branch.
Right.
That separation of powers is designed to protect individual rights, but it inherently results in messy, chaotic outcomes.
Yeah.
Like a fugitive with an international murder warrant slipping through the cracks because the different referees on the field are enforcing entirely different rule books.
And in the middle of this structural clash, you have intense, polarized rhetoric that treats this complex legal architecture as just another front in a political war. It really highlights how fragmented the concept of jurisdiction actually is.
Absolutely.
We think of the law as one unified thing, but the law in a Worcester police headquarters is fundamentally different from the law in an ICE detention center.
Which is completely different from the law in a federal judge's chambers.
Exactly. And when those distinct versions of the law collide over a single person, the fallout is massive. Which leaves us with a critical, very uncomfortable question to consider for you, the listener.
Yeah, it's a tough one.
What's that final thought?
When local courts, federal immigration authorities, and international justice systems all have overlapping claims on an individual, and when those systems actively contradict one another by design, where does the ultimate accountability lie?
Wow.
If the systems are fundamentally misaligned, who is ultimately responsible for the outcome when someone just walks free?
That is an incredibly heavy question to walk away with. You have a field with 3 referees, and they're all blowing the whistle at the exact same time. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the layers behind the headlines, and we'll catch you next time.
In the heart of this nation, under skies so blue, there's a spirit that's stirring, values strong and true. From the mountains to the prairies, from the cities to the sea, we stand for liberty, for faith and family. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground for freedom, for tradition in this land we found. We cherish our Constitution, the words that set us free, the right to bear arms, to speak and to agree. We honor our forefathers who fought with steadfast might for the dream of a nation shining bright in the night. In every town and village, in every heart and home, we'll uphold our principles, together we'll roam. Through trials and through triumphs, we'll never lose our way, with conservative values leading us day by day. We're diving deep into the heart of what we believe. Conservative values in our souls, they're interweaved. With courage and with honor, we'll hold our ground for freedom, for tradition in this land we found. So here's to the brave, to the strong, to the free, to the spirit that binds us from sea to shining sea. We'll dive deep